This case was hidden because it exposed a web of lies spun within the highest echelons of a quiet suburban community. But today, I will tell you how a simple divorce turned into a carefully staged trap, and how one man's attempt to control his fate unraveled into a nightmare of deceit. For years, no one dared to speak of it. The official story was clean, tidy, an ordinary breakup, nothing more. But a single leaked document, a file marked Operation Red Moon, revealed the truth buried beneath layers of silence and falsehoods. It started in Akron, Ohio, where Michael Carter, a middle-aged businessman, filed for divorce from his wife, Danielle Ruiz. On paper, it was straightforward. Irreconcilable differences, a custody dispute over their 2 children. But beneath the surface, something much darker lurked. I first encountered the case during a routine review of family court records, but what caught my eye was the pattern of anomalies, discrepancies that didn't add up. Would you have noticed this detail in the file? It was a minor inconsistency, an address that changed suddenly, a witness who recanted, a missing day in the surveillance logs. But I knew better than to dismiss the small signs. They're often the first clues in a bigger puzzle. Michael Carter was no ordinary man. He was connected, an associate of shadow clinics, ghost medical providers, and underground finance channels. His income wasn't just from legitimate business. It was a mosaic of fraud, crypto laundering, and discreet extortion. The divorce was a cover, a way to manipulate public records and hide the true source of his wealth. Didn't this seem strange to you from the very beginning? It's common for men in his position to use legal chaos as a shield, but I was convinced there was more. I found a supposed accident that Michael claimed caused Danielle's supposed overdose, an incident that was quickly dismissed as tragic but never fully investigated. The medical records were manipulated, or so I thought at the time. But the real breakthrough came when I obtained access to internal communications, files from an anonymous source, encrypted messages hinting at Operation Red Moon. It was a code name for a shadow operation designed to stage a divorce and eliminate any threat of her uncovering his dark dealings. Why do you think this was hidden for so long? Because the entire setup rested on a fragile illusion of tragedy. Danielle was accidentally killed in a staged car crash. The scene was meticulously planned. An intersection near their cul-de-sac, a mailbox with the number 73301, a witness who was coached, but something in the report felt off. Would you have questioned the timing? The crash happened on June 14, 2011, late evening, right after Danielle had threatened to expose certain financial irregularities. I traced her phone records, an unusual pattern of calls, a last-minute trip that she insisted was for a business meeting. But her movements didn't add up. And then, the betrayal. I uncovered a hidden ledger, an encrypted file recently accessed from a shadow server. It detailed a series of payments to a ghost clinic, a front for laundering money. Danielle had been onto him, digging through financial records, threatening to go public. Michael knew the only way to silence her was to stage her death. Didn't this seem suspicious to you from the very start? The timing, the cover stories, the staged accident, all of it pointed to a premeditated act. But I was unsure, haunted by the possibility of an innocent victim caught in the trap of a desperate man. By the time I connected the dots, the web was tightening. The police reports, witness testimonies, forensic analysis, all pointing to a carefully crafted setup. But the key was the internal silence. People knew, but they kept quiet. Fear, loyalty, or the unspoken rule, never speak of the operation. I still remember the moment I realized this was never about the divorce. It was about control, power over life and death, over truth and lies. Michael Carter had orchestrated her disappearance, convincing everyone it was an accident while secretly laundering millions. Did you notice how the family, her friends, all pretended not to see the signs? They knew, I think they knew, or at least suspected, but the fear kept them silent. That's how these operations survive, by breeding silence, by creating a culture of complicity. And what about the children? They were kept in the dark, raised with a version of reality that would crush them if exposed. The oldest son, now grown, recently contacted me, haunted by vague memories of her voice, stories he couldn't piece together. He asked if she had really died. I told him the truth was stranger and darker than any fairy tale. The downfall came when I traced a suspicious transfer, an unregistered minor, a shadow account linked to the Operation Red Moon Fund. The authorities finally moved in, arrests were made, but Michael Carter vanished from the records, disappeared into the shadows, like many others before him. Would you have believed the official version, that Danielle Ruiz died in an accident, leaving her family broken? Or would you have suspected the carefully staged trap, the silent witnesses, the coded messages? If this had happened in your family, what would you have done? Would you have accepted the lie, or fought to uncover the truth? Because behind every accident like this, there's a trail, an unspoken rule that someone is always watching, always listening. And the most unsettling part, even after all the arrests, the confessions, the evidence, some pieces still remain out of reach, files sealed, witnesses silenced, and the shadow operation continuing in the background. I can't help but wonder, what's still hidden? This case was never just about a divorce. It was a mirror, reflecting how easily trust can be exploited, how secrets can be buried so deep that they never see the light. I've seen enough to know that the truth is often the last thing they want us to find. If you've listened this far, you're searching for the truth. Subscribe, I'll show you the next case. These files rarely survive to the end. Subscribe while this one is still here. Every day, I'll post a real case from my archive, investigations I solved that still unsettle me. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and drop a comment, because these stories aren't just stories, they're warnings. Stay safe. See you tomorrow. The story doesn't end with the arrests. Not really. Because the deeper I dug, the more I realized that Michael Carter's escape wasn't just a matter of disappearing into the shadows. It was the tip of an iceberg, an entire network of silent players, each with their own secret motives, each complicit in keeping the truth submerged. After the initial fallout, I requested access to the full case files through FOIA. What I uncovered was a labyrinth of cover-ups, redacted reports, destroyed evidence, witnesses who suddenly vanished after testifying. It was clear that someone in the system had been protecting him all along. Would you have noticed this detail in the file? A strange pattern of lost phone logs, calls deleted just before key meetings, encrypted messages that never made it to the official record. It seemed like the entire operation was designed to leave no trace. But I knew better. I kept digging. One night, I intercepted an unmarked package left at a secure drop point. Inside, a flash drive with a label, Operation Red Moon. Final files. I remember the weight in my hands, the silent warning. What I found was chilling. Detailed instructions, a list of approved contacts, and a blueprint for future operations. More staged accidents, more silenced witnesses. Didn't this seem strange to you from the very beginning? The way the evidence was so carefully manipulated, the way witnesses were coerced or threatened. It's a pattern. One I've seen before in cases like these, where power and money blur the line between justice and corruption. And then I realized the entire operation was bigger than one man, bigger than one family. It was a covert enterprise, a shadow system that operated outside the law, protecting its own at all costs. Michael Carter was just a node, a pawn in a game played by unseen hands. I often wonder, what if Danielle had survived? If she had gone public, exposed the operation, would she have been silenced permanently? Or would her voice have finally broken through the silence that had been cultivated around her? I think about her sometimes in those quiet moments, and I wonder if she ever knew how close she was to the truth. Would you have believed her if she told you she was being watched? That her own family was part of a larger conspiracy? Because I did. I believed her, even when everyone else dismissed her fears as paranoia. Sometimes, the truth is stranger than fiction. The final act came when I identified the key players, lawyers, officials, even some local law enforcement, who were paid off, threatened, or coerced into silence. The operation had layers of deniability, a web woven so tightly that exposing it risked everything. I remember a confidential source telling me, "If you go too deep, they'll come for you." And I knew the risks. I knew I was treading on dangerous ground, but I couldn't stop. Not after seeing how many lives had been twisted by this invisible machine. This wasn't just about a divorce gone wrong, it was about control, over truth, over life, over death. In the end, the authorities caught some of the peripheral figures, but Michael Carter vanished. No trace of him after 2014. Rumors swirled that he'd been taken somewhere quiet, perhaps outside the US, or that he'd gone into hiding under a false identity. But here's the thing I've come to accept. Some of these shadows are never fully illuminated. Some secrets stay buried, even when the case is closed. That lingering doubt, that gnawing suspicion that the operation may still be ongoing somewhere, haunts me. If this were investigated today, how do you think it would end? Would they finally dismantle the network, Or would the core still operate in the dark, protected by layers of silence and fear? I don't have the answer. All I know is that the truth has a way of surfacing when you least expect it. Would you have done what I did? Challenged the system, risked everything to uncover what was hidden, or would you have turned away, content with the official story? Be honest, what looks most suspicious to you in this story? And why do you think this was hidden for so long? Because revealing it would threaten powerful interests, those who profit from the lies, those who prefer the silence. That's why I keep these files locked away, only sharing them here, where they can't be silenced. If this case were to be reopened, with new evidence or witnesses, I believe the web would unravel further. But for now, it remains buried, like so many others. Every day I see the patterns repeat. Families torn apart, secrets kept, lies sold as truths. This story is a warning, a glimpse into how easily trust is exploited, how innocence can be manipulated, and how some shadows are never fully gone. If you've listened this far, you're already part of the investigation. Subscribe, I'll show you the next case. These files rarely survive to the end. Subscribe while this one is still here. Every investigation I've done leaves a mark on me, but I keep going. Because somewhere out there, someone is still hiding the real story, and I won't stop until I find it. This file was never meant to be released. Subscribe while it's accessible. And if you've made it this far, you're already part of the truth. Stay cautious, stay skeptical, and I'll see you tomorrow. The trail grew colder after Carter's disappearance, but the web of lies only grew more tangled. I kept chasing shadows. Every lead, every whisper, every document pointed to a larger, more sinister operation that extended far beyond Akron. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. This was no isolated incident. It was part of a clandestine pattern, systematic, calculated, designed to erase inconvenient truths. One night, I managed to access a secure server linked to one of Carter's known associates, a shadowy figure operating under the alias The Architect. Inside, I found a series of encrypted communications. They spoke of final measures, cleaning the witnesses, and finalizing the operation. The language was clinical, ruthless. Someone was orchestrating a silent purge, removing anyone who threatened to expose the core of this operation. Would you have noticed this pattern if you had seen it? I've learned that in these kinds of cases, the smallest details matter. The cryptic references, the coded language. They're the breadcrumbs left by people who know they're being watched. And I knew then that this was bigger than any one man. It was a machine, an invisible force that protected its own at all costs. The more I looked, the more I realized that Danielle's accident was just one piece of a puzzle. There were unregistered minors, shadow clinics operating without licenses, off-the-books transactions flowing through shell companies. All part of a covert operation that used staged tragedies to serve a hidden agenda. Didn't this seem suspicious to you from the very start? The way the supposed accident was so precisely timed, so perfectly staged? It was a calculated move, designed to eliminate a threat while leaving no trace. And the witnesses, coerced, threatened, or bought off. Their silence was bought with promises or fear of retribution. I started questioning myself. What if Danielle had survived? What if she'd spoken out? Would she have been believed? Or would she have vanished, just like Carter? I wonder if she ever suspected that her life was part of a larger game, one played by unseen players who valued secrets more than lives. I found a hidden financial trail, an offshore account linked to a shell company in Belize, with transfers that matched the timeline of Danielle's supposed accident. It was a classic money laundering scheme masked behind layers of corporate entities designed to keep the truth out of reach. This wasn't just a personal vendetta, it was a systemic operation, a business built on silence and fear. Why do you think they went to such lengths? Because exposing the truth would threaten their entire network. It would unravel the entire operation, destroying the illusion of legitimacy, revealing the dark underside of what they called family law. I've seen these patterns before. Once the cover-up begins, it's nearly impossible to stop. And the family, her children, what became of them? I tracked their records, their schools, their social media profiles. They were carefully kept away from the truth, raised with a sanitized story of loss and tragedy. But I could see the cracks in the facade. The oldest boy, now 16, had been asking questions about her, about his father, about the strange gaps in the timeline. When I reached out, I sensed he was close to uncovering something himself. Would you have done what I did? Would you have risked everything to tell the truth? Because in these cases, silence isn't just a choice, it's a mandate. The system, the network, the operation, call it what you will, fights to keep its secrets buried. And the more you dig, the more dangerous it gets. The final blow came when I uncovered a sealed court order, signed by a judge, sealed with a special stamp. It was an order to discontinue all investigations into Danielle's death. Officially, it was a routine paper, but I recognized the signature, the language. Someone high up in the system had intervened, and Carter, he was never seen again. No public records, no new addresses, no known whereabouts. But I received an anonymous tip, an encrypted message that hinted he was living under a false identity in a small town in Texas, possibly working in a shadow business that kept him hidden, protected. Would you believe the official narrative? That he slipped away, evaporated into the shadows, and left no trace? Or do you see the pattern, one of manipulation, concealment, and cold calculation? Because, in truth, I think they wanted him to vanish, to become a ghost, an untraceable ghost, so that the operation could continue quietly, indefinitely. If this case were reopened today with new evidence or witnesses willing to speak, I believe the entire network would collapse, but I doubt it ever will. These people operate in the dark, protected by layers of silence, by legal loopholes, by the fear they instill in others. Why do you think the truth remains hidden? Because revealing it would threaten powerful interests, those who profit from the silence, those who have everything to lose if the shadows are exposed. That's why I keep these files buried, only sharing fragments here, in the hope that someone might see the pattern before it's too late. Every investigation leaves scars, on me, on the families, on the system itself. But I've learned that some stories are too dangerous to tell outright. They're better left in the shadows, where the truth can't be silenced. If you've listened this far, you're already part of the ongoing search. Subscribe, and I'll show you the next case. These files rarely survive the light of day. Subscribe while you still can. Because the more I uncover, the clearer it becomes. Some secrets are never truly gone. They just wait, lurking in the dark, ready to surface when you least expect. And I'll be watching, because the truth doesn't rest. It only sleeps, waiting for someone brave enough to wake it up. This file was never meant for your eyes. Subscribe while it's still accessible. And if you've made it this far, you're already part of the investigation. Stay cautious, stay questioning, and I'll see you tomorrow. The deeper I went, the more I realized that Carter's disappearance was just the tip of a much larger iceberg. An elaborate network of covert operations, hidden alliances, and unspoken rules. I started to piece together how many lives had been manipulated, how many truths had been silenced, all under the guise of protecting family interests. One particular lead took me to a discreet meeting in a strip mall parking lot outside Fresno, California. An informant, cloaked in shadows, handed me a flash drive with a simple message. It's all connected. Operation Red Moon is just one piece. Inside that drive, I found encrypted files, maps, and a list of aliases, names I recognize from other cases, other investigations. Would you have noticed this pattern if you had seen it? The way these operations intersect, money laundering, shadow clinics, false identities, they're all part of a carefully designed system, and someone at the top is orchestrating it all, pulling the strings behind the curtain. I uncovered an internal memo discussing finalizing the cleanup of witnesses, people who might threaten to expose the operation. It was chilling. The language was cold, precise. Terminate all compromised assets. No loose ends. I realized then that the staged accident was just the beginning. There was a calculated effort to erase anyone who knew too much. Didn't this seem suspicious to you from the very start? The way the supposed accident was so meticulously arranged, so similar to other cases I've seen? It's a pattern, one of control, of eliminating threats. And the thing is, most of it was hidden behind a facade of legitimacy. Lawyers' letters, court orders, corporate filings, all designed to deceive. I found a confidential report from a law firm specializing in family law solutions, a front for legal manipulation, detailing tactics like covert influence, fabricated evidence, and discrediting witnesses. When I read it, I understood that the entire legal system had been infiltrated, weaponized against the truth. Would you have believed that the court orders sealing the case files, the judge's signature, those could have been forged? I traced the signatures, the stamps, the chain of custody. It was almost too easy to fake when you had the right connections. Someone wanted Danielle's story buried forever. And her children? The youngest was only 5 when she died. Now he's a teenager, asking questions about the woman he barely remembers. His school records show an unusual pattern: absences, sudden transfers, hidden medical visits. Someone was hiding her from him. I reached out to his teachers just to see if I could find a crack in the story. Would you do the same? Would you risk your career, your safety, to uncover the truth about a child's mother? Because I've learned that sometimes the most innocent victims are the ones caught in the crossfire of these shadow games. The final piece came when I discovered a sealed court transcript, an order to permanently seal evidence related to Danielle's death. It was signed by a judge who had a history of questionable rulings. I found connections, former colleagues, political ties, all pointing to a network that protected itself at all costs. And Carter? Rumors say he's living under a false identity in a small Texas town, working in a low-profile job, always looking over his shoulder. I received an anonymous tip that he's part of a shadowed community, people who vanished into the quiet cracks of society, masters of disguise. Would you believe that such a man could disappear so completely, that the system would let him slip away, knowing what he's capable of, or that he's still out there, somewhere, watching, waiting? Because I've seen enough to know these cases never truly end. They only fade into the background until someone dares to shine a light again. If this case were reopened today with new evidence, how would it go? Would the truth finally surface? Or would the entire operation go underground once more? I fear the latter, because these networks have roots deep in the fabric of local and national institutions, layers of protection that make exposure almost impossible. Why do you think this was hidden for so long? Because revealing the full scope would threaten powerful interests, those profiting from the silence, from the lies, from the control. That's why I keep these files in the shadows, only sharing what's necessary to show the pattern, to hint at the darkness lurking just beneath the surface. Every investigation leaves scars, on me, on the families, on the fragile trust that once held communities together. But I've come to accept that some truths are too dangerous to fully reveal. They're better kept in the dark, where they can't be weaponized again. If you've listened this far, you're already part of the ongoing search. Subscribe, and I'll keep showing you what the system doesn't want you to see. These files rarely survive the light of day. Subscribe now, while the truth is still within reach. Because every piece I uncover makes it clearer. Some shadows never truly go away. They only hide, waiting for the right moment to resurface. And I'll be watching, because the truth is a fragile thing, always on the verge of breaking free. This file was never meant for your eyes. Subscribe while it's still accessible. And if you've made it this far, you're already part of the investigation. Stay cautious, question everything, and I'll see you tomorrow.